Hey everybody, I'm Seth V for the Knife Center, and today we're talking about the most improved knives of all time. Let's check them out. In a competitive market, even the very best knives sometimes have to change to keep up with the times. And a lot of the knives on the table here actually trace all the way back to as early as the 1990s. They've changed quite a bit over the years to get to where they are today. This topic came up between a conversation David and I were having, centered around two new Benchmades that are coming out this week, both of which are iterations of previous models. One of them is a pretty small change and one of them is a pretty big change. So let's talk about those first. This right here is the North Fork, and it is $207 and it's available today. As of this video, it came out today, so you should be able to get your hands on it now. Let's talk about what's different with this knife. Previous versions had a recurved blade, and in this latest iteration, they've gone to just a standard drop point with no recurve. Now, it's a really small change, but I think it's one that a lot of users are going to appreciate. Something even I've saw a lot of people saying in comments and stuff like, you know, oh, I love that knife, but I wish it didn't have the recurve. Well, now it doesn't. Some people may enjoy a recurve for some of the added length that it gives and the recurve's ability to gather cuts as you get close to the handle and kind of push back and keep your blade in a cut as it passes through. But the big downside to recurve blades is that they're harder to sharpen. Sometimes much harder to sharpen depending on exactly the angles of the handle to the blade there. They require specialized equipment, not that specialized, you know, any ceramic rod can handle a recurve, but it is something extra to think about. And when you're shopping for a knife and there's so much other competition, something like that can be the difference between buying it and not buying it. So with this version, I think they're going to satisfy a lot more people. And I'm really glad to see this back in Benchmade's lineup because it's a really kind of a classy design that not a lot of other stuff compares with, in my opinion. So this has 3 inches of blade, S30V steel, and these really cool kind of milled, stabilized wood handles. Originally this was part of Benchmade's Hunt line. I believe it still is, in fact, but it's got a bit of that hunting knife character to it, that woodsy, rustic attitude, and I think it gives it a charming kind of appeal, a little bit classier look, but it's still very much a performance knife made to be deft and to really perform as a hunting knife if you need it to. So overall, it's small tweaks here. It's just a change to the edge profile, not even really to the blade shape. The handle's mostly the same. Still got that Benchmade split arrow pocket clip for a classic look. I mean, just a little tweak to kind of bring it up to speed and give people and give more people what they want, to make it more usable for more people. But the next knife actually represents a pretty big change for Benchmade and is also a much bigger jump in time. This is the upcoming Benchmade 710. This is the full production version and it's coming out this Thursday. So these are $405 and they feature S90V steel, milled aluminum handles, and a somewhat redesigned axis lock mechanism here. So the original Benchmade 710 came out in 1999. Yeah, that'd be 25 years ago. This knife comes out this year to celebrate the 25th anniversary. And more generally, not just this design, but the 25th anniversary of the axis lock, which was debuted on the original 710. So this is a celebration of really one of the designs that made Benchmade into the company that it is today, frankly. I mean, the axis lock is such a fantastic, usable, innovative design. It really set Benchmade apart all those years while they had it patented. You know, today you can get crossbar locks on lots of different knives, but Benchmade have decided to stay sort of one step ahead. They're not resting on their laurels, and they've gone back and changed the internal mechanisms of the axis lock to improve it in very meaningful ways. So the first thing that they changed is what you can see right here. The kind of axis bar has been re-engineered to give it a little bit of slope so it's easier to pull against to disengage. It's not a big change. I don't honestly find it that much easier to use, but you know, it's something visible that may be a quality of life improvement for some people. But what I'm more excited about is what's on the inside. They have completely changed the way they're making the Omega springs. Rather than being made from a kind of just a round wire bent to shape, it's now a kind of a leaf spring type material. So it's a flat sheet that's bent to shape, and that should make the springs way, way, way more robust. They're going to be much less likely to break and need to be replaced. And you know, one of the original strengths of the Benchmade axis lock was the fact you had 2 springs. So if one broke, the lock wasn't going to fail completely because you still had the other spring backing you up. But with these new springs, you still have 2, but they're also much, much more robust. The feel of it is silky smooth. If anything, the spring tension feels slightly less, so it's even smoother, but that might just be this example. I wouldn't say that that's going to be true across the board. But yeah, this design, I mean, it's a little old-fashioned in a way. It does have that recurve, right? We just talked about how people these days may not enjoy that, but it's very much a part of this design's character, and I, for one, am glad to see the recurve still on this knife. I have an original 710. I carry it, I use it. It's a phenomenal design. It's a real big, easy knife, the way it folds up slim, carries deep in the pocket, and doesn't weigh all that much either. So it's cool to see Benchmade kind of revisiting their history with this, improving things internally and externally to just deliver a classic design, make it better than ever. But if any company is in the habit of doing that constantly, it's Spyderco. This is the Military 2. This version features micarta scales, crew wear steel, and comes in at just under $230. So Spyderco is constantly kind of refining their knives. Even when they don't change the name of the knife, say going from the Delica 1 to the Delica 2, for example, they still might change tiny little things here and there just to improve their manufacturing processes, to deal with customer problems or frequent return issues, little things like that, changing the position of the pocket clip, constantly improving. They call it constant quality improvement, CQI, and it's really built into the way that Spyderco designs and manufactures knives. This redesign, the Military 2, is kind of a big deal for Spyderco, at least. The original Military was very popular because it did something unique, especially for the time. It offered a lot of blade, 4 inches, in an ultralight but very strong package. Back in the 90s, ultralight knives were made of plastic. They may not have had, that kind of rock solid feel that the Spyderco Military has, but because there was very little metal on the inside of the Military, they just had a tiny little liner and a locking leaf for the liner lock. It had a surprisingly lightweight feel that really worked for a lot of people and worked so well, in fact, that they hesitated to redesign it all the way up until last year. But ultimately, the original Military was starting to feel a little long in the tooth for a lot of people. It only came tip down, for example. The liner lock is not as strong or as easy to use, for right-handed people at least, as Spyderco's compression lock. And so last year, they finally did it. They kind of gave the people what they've been asking for with the Military 2. This has the compression lock, it's got the reversible clip, so still comes tip down, but you can flip it to tip up, and also the left side as well. Ergonomics have been tweaked slightly. The original Military had a kind of a shrimpy little finger choil. I quite like it. I find it wasn't quite as prescriptive as this, but this one definitely gives you more room, which I think is going to make a lot of people happy. And you still have that ultralight character. I mean, this weighs 4.3 ounces for 4 inches of blade. That's pretty good considering this has full steel liners and micarta scales. Yeah, robust feel, finger-safe operation. The Military 2 truly took a great knife and made it even better, and made it cheaper too. These actually come in less than the liner lock versions. This crew wear version is a little more expensive, but if you're just comparing apples to apples, the Military 2 is significantly more affordable than the Military 1, and that is definitely an improvement. All right, now let's go way back to what is actually one of Spyderco's very first designs, the humble Delica. The C11 Delica, I believe. The Delica first came out in 1990. A lot has changed over the years, and in fact, the history of the Delica kind of traces the history of the evolution of pocket knives in general. If you really look back at those original versions, we don't have it here today, but we're gonna get some B-roll of our buyer Jason's original Gen 1 Delica, just so you can see how much has changed, how old-fashioned that knife is. The originals had a molded plastic pocket clip, which worked but didn't carry the knife very deeply. It wasn't reversible, and worst of all, it broke and then had to be, then the whole knife had to be replaced just to fix it. It also had a very pointy tip, another thing that Spyderco would kind of revise and change slightly. Everything that's different about this Delica is the result of years and years of Spyderco looking at warranty claims and returns and manufacturing issues and just saying, you know, how can we make this better? How can we get less knives returned to us? How can we fix fewer pocket clips? How can we make this knife better? And it's kind of a ship of Theseus situation, you know, like every part on the Delica as it is today has nothing to do with the original Delica. The handle profile is different. The blade grind is different. The blade shape's different. Really the only things that's the same is the lock type. It was a back lock back then, it's a back lock now. But by iterating over the years, they have managed to keep the Delica relevant and really maintain the mission statement, which is an affordable, high-performance cutting tool that is going to work for virtually everyone. And I still think that's true. I love this K390 version. It comes in a little more expensive than the standard versions at $132, but K390 steel is special stuff, takes an edge, holds it forever, and as long as you don't need stainlessness, I think it's the version to get. This is a quintessential EDC knife. I think it's an essential part of really any knife collection, but especially if you're into Spydercos. They are just kind of a friendly, usable package that, like I said, just works for everyone. So the knife has changed over the years, but the mission statement remains the same. And that's true of the next knife too, the Native 5. And I wanted to pull this because looking back on the original Native, it's very different. In fact, the Native 5 has gone through a lot of big changes over the years. It's moved production from the USA to Japan and back. The whole handle profile has changed. The finger choil has changed. We've got an original one to show in the B-roll so you can see just how different they are. But yeah, this is a case where the refinements have come after years, and the result is, you know, really one of the best USA-made backlocks ever. This version in particular is kind of extra special. It is sort of the ultimate Native 5 at $300 with S90V steel and sculpted carbon fiber handles. It's a, I don't know, it's like a swan song to the Native. This is the sweetest version you can get. And it still has the same character or mission statement, if you will, of the original Native, which was to be a USA-made knife that offered a robust blade that also did not, that did not have that characteristic Spyderco kind of hump for the hole. As you can see with the Delica, got a little bit of a bump there that goes around the spider hole. You know, it's fine, I don't mind it, but I would say that some people would find it quite awkward, whereas the Native has this kind of smooth and river rock-like profile. It's really nice in the pocket, you know, it's sort of smooth going in and out, and it's just gonna work for people who may not otherwise be interested in Spyderco for aesthetic reasons. And over the years, Spyderco has added a lot of the features that customers have been asking for, such as reversible pocket clip, 4-way carry, and the manufacturing quality has only gotten better. These are smoother and more solid than they've ever been. Truly a great knife that got there through iteration. Next up is a brand that isn't known for making particularly refined knives, but that nonetheless has done a lot of refinement to their knives over the year, and that's Cold Steel. This right here is the Recon 1. At $119, this features S35 VN steel, G10 handles, and the super strong triad lock. So the original Recon 1 was frankly a totally different knife. It had a whole different handle and blade shape and locking mechanism, and it came out in 2001. For as long as Cold Steel's been around, they've been trying to make the strongest folding knives they possibly could. And they've experimented with a number of ways to do that over the years. The lock on the original Recon 1, I believe it was called the Power Lock. Correct me if I'm wrong, commenters please. But that lock sort of looked a little bit like the Axis lock. It had a sliding bar. It was very strong, but as soon as they landed on the Triad lock, they redesigned basically their whole lineup around it. So in 2010, this got the redesign to look the way that it does now, and it became kind of an instant classic. I mean, the ergonomics are fantastic. They lock your hand into place. They feel very confidence-inspiring. The Triad lock, of course, is legendary for its strength and its toughness. Very, very cool knife. It's fun to see the evolution over the years, and you know, it goes to show that Cold Steel really does care about making the best knife. They are happy to go back and revisit old designs to make them better. In fact, one little change that is you may not notice just from photographs, but the old versions of the Recon 1, like the first generation of the redesign back in 2010 or so, they used to have a really awkward sharpening notch. The plunge grind didn't meet the sharpening choil, and so you still got this really over wide edge here at the heel, even though you had a sharpening choil. And it's one of those little things that always bugged me. So I was really thrilled when I picked up a Recon 1 a few years ago to see that, wow, you know, they'd redesigned the plunge grind and now it meets with the sharpening choil, and they noticed that too, and they fixed it. Little improvements like that make the knife easier to sharpen. They make the knife easier for a end user to keep and maintain themselves over time. They make the knife better. So that's why the Recon 1 is one of the most improved. The Cold Steel Voyager as well has really changed over the years. It's even older than the Recon 1. The first Voyagers were just regular backlocks, not the Triad lock you see here. They came out sometime in the 1990s. I couldn't pin it down exactly, but the Voyager's been a part of Cold Steel's lineup almost as long as Cold Steel has existed. Safe to say it's a mainstay, and this latest generation just offers those operational improvements that the Triad lock gives them. It's stronger than ever. The ergonomics have been redesigned. You know, you've got multiple grip options back here. This is the extra large version, and it is extra large with 5.5 inches of blade. Very grippy handles, ambidextrous pocket clip. Well, the pocket clip isn't ambidextrous, but comes with a left-hand pocket clip in the box for to carry ambidextrously. And there's a bunch of blade shape options now too. There's tanto, drop point, clip point, and even the very recurved vaquero blade, which are super wicked looking. Thomas, is it me or is my chair sinking?
I think it is.
All right, let's pause for a chair reset here.
Yes, you were.
Well, it's too late to go back now. Hopefully they could still see me and the knives. And we'll just carry on like nothing happened.
Nothing did happen.
Exactly. So the first generation of the Voyager was a much simpler design, kind of a more straightforward handle. It still had some pretty large blade options in the lineup, but the triad lock has just allowed Cold Steel to do so much more, to really push the dimensions of their knives, to make a 5.5-inch folder that truly holds up to all the torque and leverage you're going to be able to put on it with a handle this big. Yeah, the Voyager is definitely one of the most improved knives. So the next brand I wanted to talk about, I kind of want to open up for discussion to the comments, because this represents a different sort of philosophy of improvement, in my opinion, and that's CIVIVI. So CIVIVI came out of the gate with 3 knives, one of which was this, the Backlash. This version is actually still available. It comes in at $42.50 with 9CR steel, G10 handles, and steel liners. And CIVIVI started out with designs that were good, definitely impressive, but had a bit of, shall we say, questionable aesthetic choices. For example, these very colorful liners. The originals had gold liners, blue liners. They were, I guess they were just not to the taste of the knife buyers at the time. I don't know that they are today either, but the knives were built well enough, and once they got into the hands of customers, they realized that, you know, especially for the money, for $40, they represented something pretty special. But I don't think CIVIVI would be where they are today if they kept making knives like this, you know, with the blue liners and just the liner locks. Flipping action's still great. CIVIVI, more so than virtually any other company I've seen, is very attentive to what their customers are saying. After this first generation of CIVIVI knives, they came out with different knives that were in kind of response to what was working, what wasn't, and they've continued that approach to improvement. You know, rather than taking a few core designs and just tweaking and iterating them slowly over the years to get them better and better, they've taken, I don't know, something of like a shotgun approach. They put out a ton of designs throughout the year, and then the stuff that works sticks around and kind of informs the next batch of designs as they come through. It's a different way of working, but it's had incredible results for them. I mean, the knives that CIVIVI is building today are phenomenal, and I wanted to show one here that represents both where CIVIVI came from and where they are today. This is the Praxis, and this version is $94.95. And although the Praxis was one of those early CIVIVI designs, this version has come as a response to everything that people have been asking them for. For example, it's got a button lock, so they completely re-engineered the design with a button lock. Feels and flips amazing. Yeah, it closes with like a satisfying authority. Just, you can feel that button grabbing the knife as it comes closed. Aluminum handles are strong and solid. They have a bit of like an anodized texture to them, so they don't feel super slick. The blade still has a great flat grind that comes to a nice keen edge. But this blade steel is kind of something special. It's Damascus, and I love the treatment they've given here. We've got this really dark, almost acid washed looking kind of finish on most of the blade, but then those layers of lamination really pop with almost a polished finish. I don't know how they achieved it, but it looks great. Even the pocket clip has changed. You know, back in the day, the CIVIVI pocket clips looked like the one on this Backlash with some holes in it. They were shiny. I think, you know, customers said, you know, it looks a little cheap. And so, the next generation of knives, CIVIVI moved to something that was a little more elegant. It can be a little overwhelming sometimes with the amount of new product that CIVIVI releases, but if you take a broader view of the brand, you can really see how they are responding to customer feedback. They are trying to make the best knives possible and just kind of letting what works guide them. And I think that's an interesting and productive way to do it. I think it's worked for them, and it's resulted in some very, very excellent knives. The last brand I want to talk about today is Microtech. So Microtech has been making big changes recently. Starting in 2023, I want to say, they came out with a whole new locking mechanism, the ram-lok, that opened up a whole new world for them in terms of manual knives. But they're not resting on their laurels when it comes to their automatic knives either. This is the Gen 3 Combat Troodon. This version is $465 with M390 MK steel, aluminum handles, and it's actually all new. It's been totally redesigned from the inside out. Let me grab one of the original Combat Troodons here so you can see the difference. So this is the Gen 2 here at the bottom. It's both bigger and more affordable than the original version. And they've kind of made some quality of life improvements. For example, the screws on the new version are Torx, so user adjustable. The glass breaker has been streamlined, kind of minimized to make it a friendlier companion in the pocket. And most noticeably is the action. The Gen 2 is much easier to actuate and smoother than the Gen 1. It works. You may not be able to see me straining, but the spring tension here is noticeably stronger. The way that Microtech has achieved that super smooth action is through a couple of different ways. First of all, inside, it's rocking what they're calling their dual fuel mechanism, which just means that there are two springs now that control the deployment and retraction of the blade. Using two springs allows them to keep each spring with less tension. The springs are longer, so there's a little bit more kind of travel. One spring doesn't have to stretch quite as far to move the blade. And the other thing they did is these milled lines under the switch here. I believe they're calling this their crud cutter switch. But what it means basically is less friction. There's less surface area for the switch to slide on, so it feels smoother. In my experience, these new generation Troodons are just as reliable as the old generation. I've never had one fail on me yet. They're just as satisfying, they're easier to use. You don't have to think about it when you pull it out of the pocket and push that switch, it just goes. And I really like this pocket clip too. I'm not always the biggest fan of milled clips, but this one is truly excellent. It's got this really big ceramic ball in the tip of this clip. Makes it nice and smooth to slide over your pockets. It's got good tension, and it just looks sweet. I mean, this is a knife that really looks and feels like a generational leap for the Troodon. I think Microtech's probably going to be kind of taking a lot of these improvements to their other OTFs. I wouldn't be surprised if sometime next year we see, this get to the Ultratech or the UTX 85. It's just too good not to put everywhere. So I'll be looking forward to that, and I'm gonna have to get more Microtechs in my collection, I think. All right, the last knife on the table here is the Microtech Amphibian. This one is a real blast from the past. Like that Benchmade 710, this is a rebirth of a truly kind of a vintage design from the Microtech archives, but given a complete redesign based around the new ram-lok. The original Amphibian came out in the early 2000s. This was redesigned in 2023. This thing is just sweet. It is a thoroughbred kind of tactical folder. It's got a bit of the old school design cues with its recurved blade, a bit of its like pistol grip to the handle, but it feels every bit as solid as any other modern Microtech. It's got the ram-lok, which works and feels amazing. You can see the improvements to precision manufacturing that Microtech's had over the years in these perfectly milled and contoured scales. It's got modern touches like a milled pocket clip. And yeah, for $307, it's kind of a bargain, at least in Microtech's lineup. I mean, a manual, USA-made folder with premium steel and a premium build quality at that price is really impressive. And this is just, I don't know, it's a classic reborn. I'm really glad to see it in the lineup. I never would have expected it. It's a really cool surprise for Microtech fans who may remember the original. and a great way to get a piece of the old school tactical vibe for a new Microtech collector. You can kind of see the same era in these two knives, I think. 710 and the Amphibian are born of the same era and have some similarities. I, for one, am pretty excited by what the Amphibian represents. I hope to see more classic designs from Microtech's design archives being brought to life with these modern materials and construction. There's a lot of cool knives back there that I hope to see come back to light someday. Hopefully we'll get to see that, but for now, this is definitely one of the most improved Microtechs. And more generally, there are a lot of designs that have been improved and iterated and changed over the years. This, I think, represents some of the best, but I'd like to hear what you guys think. What did I miss here? You know, what are your favorite, most improved designs? And for that matter, what designs do you think are a little long in the tooth? You know, what's sort of falling behind? What needs improvement? Let's talk about it. I'm interested to hear your thoughts. But until then, if you want to get your hands on any of these most improved knives, click the links down in the description. Thomas will have put them there to send you over to the website. And while you're there, don't forget about our knife rewards program, because if you're going to spend any money on any of these sweet knives, you may get some money to spend on your next one. With that, I've been Seth V. That's Thomas behind the camera, and we will see you next time.